It didn't begin with a crash. There was no siren, no breaking news alert. It began quietly. In early mornings across America, alarms still rang. People still got up. They still dressed for work. Coffee still brewed. Traffic still moved. From the outside, everything looked normal. But underneath that calm surface, something had changed. This was America in the mid-2020, a nation still standing, but no longer steady. The streets were full, yet the faces were tired. The stores were open, yet carts were lighter. Homes were lived in, but peace no longer lived there. This was not a recession announcement. This was not a headline moment. This was slow pressure. Day after day, bill after bill, rent notices on kitchen tables, credit card balances climbing higher each month, medical letters unopened, student loan reminders ignored. Not because people didn't care, but because caring had become too expensive. For decades, Americans were told a simple story. Work hard, pay your bills, follow the rules, and things will work out. That story used to feel real. You could pay rent and still breathe. You could buy groceries without fear. You could miss one paycheck and recover. But now, missing one paycheck meant falling behind for months. Prices rose fast. Wages did not. Rent climbed year after year. Food costs jumped without warning. Gas, insurance, utilities, childcare. Everything demanded more, and the paycheck stayed quiet. This mattered because America was built on balance. Work for pay, pay for life. When that balance breaks, everything feels different. At first, people tried harder. They cut spending. They skipped trips. They stopped small joys. Then they cut deeper. They skipped dinners. They delayed doctor visits. They borrowed. Credit cards filled the gap. Loans covered the rest. For a while, the system held. But interest grew. Minimum payments rose. And the gap became a pit. This was when something strange began to happen. People didn't panic. They didn't riot. They didn't shout. They stopped. They stopped opening mail. They stopped answering unknown numbers. They stopped checking balances. They began choosing. Rent or credit card. Food or medical bill. Lights or loan payment. And more often than ever, the choice was survival. This shift was important because it changed behavior. Not loudly, but deeply. Fear used to keep the system running. Fear of bad credit. Fear of calls. Fear of judgment. But fear only works when there is something left to lose. For millions, that safety was already gone. A credit score meant nothing when the fridge was empty. A late fee meant nothing when rent was due. A warning letter meant nothing when exhaustion ruled the day. This was not laziness. This was not rebellion at first. It was fatigue. People were tired of running faster just to stay in place. Tired of doing everything right and ending every month at zero. Tired of feeling ashamed for a problem they didn't create. And quietly, without a leader or a name, a new pattern formed. Bills were delayed, then skipped, then ignored. Not all at once. One by one. Credit cards first, then medical bills, then student loans. The system noticed, but slowly, because this was not a collapse you could see from far away. It was a collapse you felt in private, at night, at kitchen tables, in silent bank apps. And as this behavior spread, something else faded. Belief. Belief that paying everything on time would lead to something better. Belief that sacrifice would be rewarded. Belief that the future was stable. When belief weakens, systems weaken. And America was entering that moment. Not with anger, not with chaos, but with quiet withdrawal. Millions were still working, still trying, but they were no longer fully participating. They were giving up on the idea that the system would ever catch them. And that was only the beginning. As the months passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. People were not failing the system. They were stepping away from it. In offices, warehouses, hospitals, and classrooms, Americans kept working. But their relationship with money had changed. Paychecks arrived. And instead of hope, they brought anxiety. Because the math no longer worked. No amount of planning could fix it. No budgeting app could stretch it. No extra shift could close the gap. What once felt like poor choices now felt like forced choices. This mattered because it exposed a truth many tried to avoid. The economy was still running, but it was running on exhaustion. For years, the cost of living rose faster than incomes. Housing climbed beyond reach. Healthcare became a gamble. Education turned into lifelong debt. Every system asked for payment. None offered relief. And slowly, Americans learned a new rule. Pay what keeps you alive. Delay the rest. This was not spoken openly at first. It spread through experience. A missed payment that did not destroy life. A skipped bill that did not lead to disaster. A collection call that ended with silence. Each time nothing happened, fear weakened. This was important because fear had always been the glue. Fear kept people obedient. Fear kept money moving. But now, fear was replaced by calculation. People studied consequences, not morals. They ranked bills by damage, not by guilt. Rent came first. Food came next. Transportation followed. Everything else waited. Credit cards barked but did not bite. Medical bills arrived but went unpaid. Student loans sent reminders that led nowhere. And people noticed. They noticed that skipping did not end their world. They noticed that survival felt better than obedience. They noticed they were not alone. Online, stories appeared. Not angry posts. Calm confessions. I stopped paying and nothing happened. I had to choose food. I couldn't do it anymore. Millions read them quietly. This added mystery to the moment. A shared experience without coordination. A movement without leaders. The economy was still functioning. Stores still sold. Banks still lent. But beneath it, participation was thinning. This mattered because systems depend on belief. When belief fades, rules become suggestions. Credit scores once felt sacred, a number that defined worth, a gatekeeper to the future. But now, people watch their scores fall and nothing changed. No house was coming anyway. No loan was affordable. No reward waited on the other side. The promise was broken. And once a promise breaks, loyalty breaks with it. People began to see debt differently, not as responsibility, but as a weight that slowed them, a weight that never disappeared. Paying it down brought no relief. Closing accounts lowered scores. Doing the right thing punished them. So they stopped trying to win. This was not chaos. It was adaptation. People learned the system's limits. They learned what could and could not be enforced. They learned that consequences were slower than hunger. This created a silent shift in power. Collectors called less aggressively. Offers changed tone. Balances were reduced. The system bent, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. Too many people were opting out at once. This was important because it revealed a weakness. The economy was never built to chase everyone. It was built on trust, on compliance, on routine. When routine breaks, control fades. And across the country, routine was breaking. Families delayed payments with no plan to catch up. Workers changed jobs faster than debts could follow. Young people ignored credit entirely. The old rules no longer fit the new reality. This was not rebellion fueled by anger. It was withdrawal fueled by clarity. People saw the system for what it was. A machine that demanded constant input. A machine that offered little back. And once seen clearly, it was impossible to unsee. This period mattered because it marked a turning point, not an event, a realization. Millions understood the same truth at the same time. If playing by the rules leads nowhere, stop playing. And as that thought spread, quietly and steadily, the economy began to feel hollow. Still standing, still moving, but no longer trusted. And something built on distrust cannot last forever. By the time anyone in power noticed, the change was already deep. This was no longer about missing a bill. It was about losing faith. Faith that effort would be rewarded. Faith that stability was possible. Faith that tomorrow would be better than today. For decades, Americans were told the same story. Work hard, be responsible, pay on time, and the future will open for you. But in this moment, the future stayed closed. People did everything right and still fell behind. They earned degrees that led nowhere. They worked full-time and still struggled to eat. This mattered because it broke the moral contract. When a system stops rewarding effort, it stops being respected. People did not become reckless. They became realistic. They asked a simple question. What am I protecting? A credit score that no longer unlocks a home. A reputation that no longer brings security. A promise that keeps moving farther away. Once that question took hold, behavior changed fast. People stopped opening mail. Stopped answering unknown numbers. Stopped apologizing. Silence became a shield. This was not shame. It was relief. Relief from constant pressure. Relief from fear that never delivered safety. Relief from chasing something that kept retreating. This shift was important because it spread quietly. No protests. No headlines at first. Just shared understanding. When one person admits they stopped paying and survived, others listen. Fear depends on isolation. Once people realize they are not alone, fear collapses. Entire industries felt it. Collection agencies called into empty air. Letters went unopened. Threats lost meaning. Recovery rates dropped. Lawsuits increased but overwhelmed courts. Garnishments failed in a world of job changes and gig work. The system tried to respond, but it was slow, and people had already moved on. This added mystery to the moment. The economy looked stable on paper. Markets moved. Numbers updated. But human behavior told a different story. Participation was shrinking. People used cash and debit. They avoided credit entirely. They lived smaller, tighter, quieter lives. Not because they wanted less, but because less was all that remained. This mattered because credit only works when people believe in it. Credit is a promise, a belief that borrowing today makes sense for tomorrow. But tomorrow no longer felt safe. Housing costs erased savings. Interest rates punished borrowing. Even perfect credit failed to secure approval. People asked the final question. Why keep playing? The answer arrived in behavior, not words. Defaults rose among people who once paid perfectly. Not because they couldn't manage money, but because managing it no longer helped. This was the breaking point. When disciplined people disengage, systems fail. Banks tightened rules, not to protect themselves from risk, but from disbelief. People stopped trusting outcomes. They stopped believing compliance mattered. And once belief disappears, control follows. This was not collapse through chaos. It was collapse through indifference. People were not angry enough to riot. They were tired enough to quit. And quitting is more dangerous than protest. Because protest asks for change. Quitting accepts reality. This period marked the moment Americans stopped hoping the system would save them. They stopped waiting, stopped explaining, stopped justifying. They focused on survival. Food mattered more than scores. Shelter mattered more than reputation. Health mattered more than paperwork. And in that clarity, a new truth formed. The economy was no longer something they belonged to. It was something they endured. And systems cannot survive long when the people inside them emotionally leave. The lights were still on. The machines still running. But the belief that powered them was fading fast. And once belief dies, collapse is only a matter of time. By the end, nothing exploded. There was no single crash. No sirens. No sudden silence. The economy did not fall apart in one moment. It slowly emptied. People still went to work. Stores still opened. Bills still arrived. But belief was gone. And without belief, systems rot from the inside. Americans did not stop paying because they wanted chaos. They stopped because obedience stopped making sense. When survival becomes the only goal, loyalty disappears. Paying every bill on time was once seen as responsible. Now it feels like a luxury many can no longer afford. This matters because economies are not powered by numbers. They are powered by trust. Trust that work leads somewhere. Trust that sacrifice has meaning. Trust that the future is worth paying for. That trust has collapsed. People no longer see debt as a bridge. They see it as a trap. They no longer see credit as opportunity. They see it as control. And control only works when people fear the consequences. But fear fades when there is nothing left to lose. This is why silence spread faster than panic. People did not scream. They adapted. They learned which bills could wait, which threats were slow, which systems were weak. They stopped playing by moral rules that no longer protected them. This was not rebellion with signs and chance. It was refusal. Quiet, personal, untraceable. Millions made the same choice alone, yet together. That is what makes this moment dangerous. You can negotiate with anger. You cannot negotiate with absence. Banks can raise rates. Governments can issue warnings. Collectors can call. But none of that restores belief. And belief is the engine that is missing. The truth is uncomfortable. The economy did not fail because people became lazy. It failed because it demanded more than it gave. It asked for discipline without reward, patience without progress, obedience without security. Eventually, people noticed. And once they did, the illusion broke. Credit scores stopped feeling powerful. Deadlines stopped feeling urgent. Threats stopped feeling real. Life became smaller but clearer. Eat first. Sleep safely. Stay alive. Everything else became optional. This is not the end of America, but it is the end of the old agreement. The agreement that said, follow the rules and you will be protected. That promise is gone. What replaces it is uncertain. Maybe something fairer. Maybe something harsher. Maybe nothing at all. But one thing is clear. Millions have already checked out. They are still here, still working, still breathing. But they are no longer participating in the fantasy. And systems built on belief cannot survive disbelief. This is not a temporary phase. It is a turning point. A moment when survival replaced loyalty. When silence replaced trust. When people stopped asking permission to live, the economy did not collapse loudly. It collapsed quietly. And by the time it is fully visible, it will already be too late to stop.